Hello, this is Dot. I hope you're doing well. It's already February and I don't know how did this happen. Where did the January go? So I hope your January didn't go as fast as for me. So I really enjoyed watching all of the favorites videos that many of you did. So all of the 2021 best of, the best tarot decks or the best oracle decks and similar videos. And I really would love to do a video like this, but I'm really terrible at making favorites lists. I have quite poor memory. I don't remember stuff. Sometimes I think that maybe I'm more like a dog because I live in the present. The past or the future don't really exist for me. However, I thought that I could try or give it a go at maybe doing from time to time a video about things that I enjoyed or things, so tarot decks or oracle decks that I enjoyed in the previous month or other time period. So I will start with tarot and oracle, then I will move on to some other random things, and then I will end with books. So I know that most of you are interested only in the tarot stuff, so if you don't want to watch the other part, I'll be perfectly happy if you switch off the video and both of you and both you and me will stay happy. Okay. But before I go to tarot decks and oracle decks, I want to start with the most important thing that I want to talk about, which is you. You, all the people who are so lovely, who watched my videos, who left such loving and kind comments. I can't even express how grateful I am and surprised I am that so many of you wanted to watch or subscribe or leave comments in my videos. So thank you very much. When I did my first video, I was so nervous and I was very unsure if I even can make it. I rehearsed what I wanted to say before starting recording, and even after that I had to record everything from scratch because you can hear how nervous I was. So your kind comments really warmed my heart and made my day when I got them, and also when I did the videos about the Housewives tarot deck. David left me very touching comments. I just was speechless after I read them. So thank you, David, again for the words that you wrote. It was a very meaningful comment for me. So thank you again, everyone, for watching, for just wanting to spend some time with me. Okay, so now let's go on to tarot. So I wanted to start my year with something that is simple and direct, that I won't need to put much energy into, because honestly I was feeling a bit drained and wanted to get a bit of lift up, and also I was craving sunlight and colors. Winters here are very dark and depressing. Even during the day we don't get a lot of sunlight. The sky is usually heavily overcast. So yeah, I wanted color, light, energy and simplicity. So I chose the Everyday Tarot, which is by Brigit Esselmont, and the illustrations by Eleanor Grosch. So this is a deck from the running press company, and I paired this deck with Australian Wildflower reading cards by Cheralyn and Darcey from Rockpool Publishing. So maybe I'll start with the Everyday Tarot. So this is a rendition of the original Waite-Smith deck, done in this simple, minimalistic art style. As you can see, it uses only 3 colors, gold, purple and white. And the design is very clear and not cluttered. It's very simple. I can hear its voice loud and clear. I get very direct messages from those cards. I think those illustrations look like signposts or like side road signs. So, you know, when you look at those signs, you don't have to think. You immediately get the information that the sign wants to convey to you. I think that the symbols are very, they stand out very easily in this kind of image. So when I was learning, it was much easier for me to grab the meaning from this deck in comparison to the original Waite-Smith deck. In the Waite-Smith deck, I could feel the chaos of the image. I didn't know what to concentrate on, what kind of symbol is the most important at the moment, or it was just too much going on in the card. And here the image was very direct in its in the way it conveyed the information for me, and I still love using this deck. I love the size of it, so if I want to make a bigger spread, it takes almost no. It doesn't need much space, and because the color palette is consistent, the spread is very coherent, the symbols connect to each other very easily, so I get the big message from all of these cards very well. They speak to each other very well. I don't get distracted. As I said, the voice of this deck is very clear and direct for me, and I really like the design of those cards. So yeah, I really love using the Everyday Tarot. And okay, you probably want to hear about the cardstock because I heard people complain about it, because its finish is rose petal. Of course it's matte, as you can see, but because of the rose petal finish at the beginning, the cards were a little sticky, so they clamped when you were especially overhand shuffling. They stayed in groups like that, but I found a little trick for it. So before I used the deck, I just used hand cream on my hands, and so my hands weren't dry. And now, when after using it for a bit, so I've been using this deck very extensively for more than 2 years. It shuffles perfectly. If you shuffle, it's very easy to refill shuffle it. As you can see, it shuffles very well, and there isn't even any kind of bend to the cards. The matte gilding is very nice to touch, and I don't see any kind of wear to cards at all. So it's in a perfect condition after very extensive use. So I really like this deck. And so now I want to talk a bit about the Australian Wildflower reading cards. So I got this deck at the beginning of last year when I saw that the other flower oracle by Darcey, which was called Flower Reading Cards, So that deck went out of print and I was afraid that this one will become unavailable too. But fortunately, the publisher only wanted to prepare a different edition of the flower reading cards. So now you can buy it. It's called Language of Oracle. Sorry, it's called. So the new edition, it's called Language of Flowers Oracle, and I think it comes in a smaller box. But I'm not sure. I don't have that one, but I'm planning to buy it at some point. So the Australian one, I think, was the first deck that Cheralyn produced, but don't quote me on that. And what I love about those cards is the colors. I think the colors and the sharp, bold lines, the geometric shapes, the way that they are drawn is extremely pleasing to me, and the deck is very invigorating, and the flowers are very expressive in the way they are drawn. Well, they're not drawn. In fact, Cheralyn produced lino cuts, and then she hand printed them, and afterwards she colored the prints with gouache paints. So both the images and the guidebook was written by her. As you can see, you get the name of the plant and the keyword for each of the flower. And in the guidebook, you get the black and white image, you get the name, the common name, the scientific name, which is extremely important because, you know, in different countries, the common names are different. Then you get the keyword again. And now you get 2 paragraphs. So the first paragraph is about the plant in general, so you get some information how it looks, where it grows. Often you get some cultural fact about the plant. So, for example, maybe here, indigenous Australians have long used lemon myrtle as a healing plant and a food source. And the next paragraph gives you the message from the plant, from the flower, and there's also at the end challenge of the flower. So this is like a reversed keyword or reversed interpretation of the card if you use reversals. So for example, here you have the challenge is being too open or trusting or retreating too early, and then you get the message about the healing properties of the plant. And this is what I interpreted is this is like a spiritual healing, not medicinal properties. So here the healing energy supports cleansing, protection, and assists with travel fears. So for example, here for this lemon myrtle, in the message we get that there is a need for space, distance, wandering, opening up, travel, and in general creating space right now. Perhaps this is between you and something else. Perhaps you just need to explore your opportunities a bit further. New possibilities are indicated, but they are out there. Lemon myrtle is most definitely connected with new starts, with cleansing and fresh thinking. It's also an indication of a deeper understanding of your own beliefs. You need to take into account the connection between the higher energies you may seek and what is below them. Open up and let the light in at the time for darkness is passing. What I also like about the guidebook is that not only does Cheralyn give us the bibliography, which I think is important and oftentimes forgotten, and also there's a glossary of all the botanical terms that she has used. So in my opinion, the guidebook is very well written, and I find good value in it, and I really fell in love with the cards. it's a very supportive and healing deck for me. The images are so beautiful and evocative, but also I liked the message in the guidebook. And also what I did was that, because I don't live in Australia, so I don't know these plants, so after drawing my card and reading the entry, guidebook entry, I googled how the plant looks. I googled photos, and usually I read, and usually I read the Wikipedia entry about the plant too. So it was a nice learning experience for me too. So all in all, I greatly enjoyed this deck. I remember hearing someone criticize Cheralyn's decks that they don't find the connection between the guidebook entry and the plant, or the image of the plant. However, in my experience of using this deck, I didn't have any kind of problem like this. Usually I could see why she chose the message for the plant. So it was either the way that she decided to depict the plant, so I could see this message in the image of the plant, or I could see, or I could see that one of the biological facts probably was the inspiration for writing the write-up. And also, I think that Cheralyn doesn't need to explain herself. This is her deck, and the way that I understand it is that the way that I understand it is that she has a connection, a spiritual connection to plants, and she just wanted to express those messages that she heard that plants or flowers spoke to her, the healing message, the healing energy that she felt from those flowers. And in my using of this deck, sometimes I concentrated only on the keyword, because I was using the deck in conjunction with the tarot. So maybe let's put them together. So sometimes I concentrated only on the keyword and didn't give much thought to the message, because I felt that the keyword is the most important one. My intuition was guiding me to use only the keyword. Other times there was something in the image that pulled me in to interpretation. I remember I got the blue gumflower for healing here, and the way it is depicted, these parts here looked for me like tubes of a machinery in a hospital, of a life support machinery. And it was so funny, or spot on, you could say, because by the end of the day, when I was trying to film a video, memory card in my phone broke, and this memory card was what was keeping alive my phone because I have an old phone, and it's almost impossible to use it without a memory card. So it was so funny that that day when I drew this card and I was thinking about life support systems at hospital, the life support of my phone did give up. And the next day I had to seriously reconsider, do I want to buy another memory card, or maybe decide to buy a new phone. So yeah, sometimes it was something in the image, because the representation here is a bit abstract, so You can concentrate on some part of the image, or the image resembles something to you. And other times there was some information in the guidebook entry. It could be the biological information, or maybe the way the plant looks, where it grows. Maybe it has some properties that are unique to it. And other times I was just using the message entry the healing message that Cheralyn wrote for the plant. It could be either the whole message or maybe just a standalone sentence. So, for example, I remember I got so in my daily pool I got 7 of Swords and Sturz Desert Rose with the keyword courage here. So in this card, what grabbed my attention was this little dot here. I thought this is a spot that I made with a pen probably, but no, it's part of the image. And in fact, this is a space between the neck and the jawbone. So in my interpretation, I concentrated on this little spot here, and I was thinking about this is where the vocal cords are, so this is where our words are formed, but also this is an internal part of ourselves. So I was thinking about words that actually aren't ours, but come from other people, and we internalize them. And these words or voices are half-truths or are lies, and are harmful to us or hurtful. And because this 7 of Swords we usually interpret as some kind of sneaky behavior, a behavior that is manipulative, or that we aren't sure if it's morally just, unfair behaviors. But here I wasn't thinking about behaviors, but I was thinking about words. And here in the Sturz Desert Rose, Cheralyn wrote how this plant is toxic to cat-chewing animals, so animals like cows. The way that cows and other similar animals feed themselves is that they eat grass and other plant material, they chew and swallow it, and it comes back from their stomach again to their mouth when they chew it again. So I was thinking about how those words that aren't ours but come from outside and are hurtful and are in fact they are misleading us, but we still are chewing all those words, and they come and come again to us during our lives. So instead of swallowing them for the final time and making peace with those words, either accepting them or not accepting and opposing them, those words still haunt us and come back to us. So in conclusion, when I was using those decks in tandem, I found the Wildflower reading cards a very great deck, and I will definitely come back to it again and again. And even and also the combination of this oracle with this tarot is, I think, a good one, because they share similar both lines. Maybe the colors aren't because the purple doesn't match well with the colors in the oracle, but I think the green matches well, because here you have this green beige, and here we have a lot of gold that also has a bit of green tint to it. So I think they match, and even the borders are very similar. For the second half of January, I decided to switch my tarot to the John Bauer tarot from Los Scarabeo, and this was the deck that I actually wanted to play with in December, because I wanted to have some kind of story, because I was in the mood for a storytelling deck, for fairy tales. So I took out this deck and looked at the images, but somehow I didn't end up using it in my daily pulse. So I finally took it now in January, and I thought that it would go well with the Wildflower cards, because it also has a lot of green in it. It has green borders that I didn't chop off, but then when I put the decks side by side, of course I saw that the oracle is much brighter than the John Bauer tarot. So I thought that, nah, they don't look good. This one is very energetic and vibrant, and the tarot is almost melancholic and introspective, so I should change my oracle for probably something different. But I made one sample draw to see how they talk to each other, and lo and behold, to my surprise, the pairing was so exact, and the pairing was astoundingly good. And after the fact, without even shuffling the decks, I continued to flip through them and saw that they talk to each other very well. So the cards were miraculously well fitted. So the keyword from the card was in a direct conversation with the card from the tarot. So I took it as a sign that they just want to work together, and I really did like this pairing. So in comparison to the pairing with the Everyday Tarot, here in my daily pulse, there was always a contrast between the oracle and the tarot card, and the meaning thrived on this contrast. So for example, the tarot was showing some kind of situation, and the oracle was giving a different view of the situation, or maybe it was opposing what the tarot card was showing. For instance, here it could show a problem, and here was the advice or how it should look. And another time I was reading a book, and that day I finished my book, and one card was showing one character and the other card was showing the other character, and the book was also very focused on the difference between those two characters. So these two decks, the contrast between those two decks was quite interesting dynamic. In my interpretations, it was an interesting experience. I know that some people don't use this tarot as a tarot deck, but as an oracle one. So they, for instance, cut off the borders and read only the image intuitively. But in my experience, I could see the tarot system in this deck quite well. There were maybe 3 or 4 cards that stopped me, that I had to think longer to find any kind of connection with the card. I was even thinking of maybe swapping some cards. For example, oh, it showed when it wants to be shown. So the 7 of Cups, I thought that this could be a good card for 9 of Swords, because it looks like a nightmare that keeps us awake at night. And the Nine of Swords looked more like the maybe Five of Cups card, and there was this Ten of Cups that still looks to me not so much like Ten of Cups. So oh, and here is the other card that is a quite unusual interpretation. The Four of Wands. In the traditional deck, the Four of Wands is represented as people celebrating a wedding, so celebrating an important life event, celebrating finishing of an life stage or starting a new stage in your life. So I was struggling to find any kind of connection. For instance, there is no association with stability, I thought, because the horse is galloping. And I thought that this looks like an Eight of Wands card, not like a Four of Wands. But then I read the short entry in the guidebook, and it talks about how this person here, maybe I will show you closer, that the person that sits at the rear end looks comfortable and looks stable. And how do they do it? They don't. It's look like they should fall off this horse, but somehow they don't. Somehow they cling to it and don't feel threatened to fall off. So you can read this card from a numerological approach, that it shows stability even against the chaos that is around you. And similarly, when I look, for instance, at this Seven of Cups, when we look at the traditional depiction of having many choices and not knowing which one to take, not knowing which one to choose, and there's also this danger of being misled by what is offered to you. But that card is also about daydreaming, and because the cups are in the clouds, and there's this aspect of that what is offered isn't real. So there's this danger of wild imagination that I can definitely see in this Seven of Cups. So maybe this isn't a nightmare that keeps us at night, like in the Nine of Swords, but this is a more of depiction of just what kind of strange and sometimes terrifying images our imagination can craft, and deciphering what is real and what is not. So I can see the tarot structure in those cards quite good, but of course those are the more unusual interpretations, and in fact I did enjoy looking for those different aspects of cards and finding the connections and finding my own interpretations too. So all in all, I did enjoy this deck. I don't know, I'm still using it, so maybe I will do a review of it. If you're interested, maybe let me know. Do you want to hear more about this deck? Now I'm using it with the other deck by Cheralyn Darcey, because I thought, why not? Why not continue with Cheralyn's decks? This is the Magical Herb Oracle, but this time the illustrations were done by Dear Dandy, and the illustrations are a better match than the visually are a better match. Okay, but maybe I will talk about it in a different. I will talk about it some other time. The last deck that I want to show you is a completely new one to me, and in fact I chose this deck for the challenge Tarot Bucket List, created by the Curated Shelf channel. And I've been meaning to do DVR for more than a month, but somehow I didn't have energy to do this, but hopefully I will be able to do this now. So the deck is the Thoth Tarot by Aleister Crowley and Lady Frieda Harris, and this is the deck for the prompt, a deck I hesitate working with or normally wouldn't get. And this is completely true. When I started to get interested in tarot, I didn't feel attracted to this deck. I thought that, of course, it would be, because you all know what people say about the Thoth, that it is difficult, that you have to have this wealth of knowledge about the astrology, the Kabbalah, this myriad of symbols that are in the cards that you can't understand, etc. So I was thinking, nah, I don't have brain space for this. Let me start with the Wade Smith deck. However, I saw again and again this deck in many channels, and then I heard that people use it without the astrological or the Kabbalah, that they use it like a pip deck or read it intuitively. And I also heard how Sylvain from Sylvain's Deadly Sins calls the pips in the minors pips with feeling. And then I looked closer at the pips. Yeah, he's completely right. The pips are beautiful, and I see many I see information, I see the message in those pips, and I felt attracted to them. But what was stopping me from getting the deck was in fact the majors. When I was looking at the majors online or in videos, they seemed that they are so sharp and aggressive, that there's a lot of going on, and it's like an object with sharp, pointy edges that wants to harm me. So yeah, I felt I didn't feel any kind of attraction to the majors, but I thought, let me get the deck, let me see for myself, because I did also find out that often what we see online can be that the impression we get online can be completely different from what we get from the deck when we receive it and have it in our hands. So I ordered the deluxe edition from AGM Urania, and this is the French edition. So this is the big edition. And the only reason why it's in French is because, I don't know why, but the French edition was much cheaper than the English one. So I have the French one. First of all, I love the backs, that they're all gold. There isn't this wide border around. And when I opened the deck and flipped through it, of course I like the minors, because they are, even online, I thought that they are beautiful. But then I looked at the majors, and they aren't aggressive at all. Maybe this tower is, but the image isn't cluttered, isn't chaotic. The colors are soft and fluid. In pictures online, the colors are very intense. I don't know, maybe this is a difference between AGM and US Games. So I heard that AGM has published an edition that uses new scans of cards, that has much lighter and soft colors. So honestly, I'm not very knowledgeable on all the editions of this deck, but that new version also has the gold the gold borders, so maybe this is also the new reprint that uses the new scans of images. Please, please, maybe someone should educate me what's the difference. But the deck that I have, I think, is very beautiful, and I'm very pleasantly surprised. And I even did one short reading with it, and I didn't even have much trouble with interpreting the cards. And I know nothing about astrology or Kabbalah or all those esoteric symbols that are in the cards. So I'm quite excited to see how my getting to know the deck goes through the year. I definitely will spend some time in doing daily pulls and spreads, etc., and reading some books. And if you have any kind of recommendation for the book, please let me know which book do you think is the easiest one to understand. Because I looked through, of course, the Crowley's book, and I didn't understand what was written. I looked at the other book that is often recommended by the book by Milo Duquette, and I didn't understand everything that was written there too. So maybe there is other one that is, you know, for simple people like me. And so please write some recommendations for me. So yeah, this is a deck that I'm excited to get to know and learn the system and use and enrich my tarot knowledge. Now I will move on to other random things that I enjoyed during the month. So maybe I will start with food. Food that I really enjoyed this month were some pickles that I prepared. So I did kimchi and fermented carrots. And the fermented vegetables I like to prepare whole year round. So for example, in summer when the cucumbers are in season, I do them all the time. I like to buy the sauerkraut, so the fermented cabbage. I think I tried to do it once. I think I did the fermented cabbage one too. Kimchi is a staple in my kitchen, and now this was the first time that I tried to do carrots. And all the fermented vegetables are very healthy for you, so I really recommend eating and preparing for yourself because it's much cheaper than buy. So they are rich in bacteria that is healthy for your gut. Some of them are also high in vitamin C. For instance, I know that the sauerkraut and the fermented cucumbers have lots of vitamin C, so they're good in winter or when so you don't get cold. They are good to boost up your immune system. I'm sure that kimchi has also other healthy benefits. Okay, so now I will talk about the carrots. So if you want to do them, they are very easy to make, and I will try to find an English recipe. And if I don't, you can just mail me and I will write you the English translation of the recipe that I used because it was written in Polish. So the only thing that you really need to do is chop up some vegetables, so carrots, onions, and you also add garlic and some herbs in it. And so you put all those things in a jar and pour salted water in it, and that's all. And it's to start the fermentation, the easiest way is to add some juice from sauerkraut or fermented cucumbers, because in Poland those two are the easiest one to buy at shop. And you put a dish like put a dish on top of the vegetables, so like so maybe a plate or some other small container that acts like wave, so that the vegetables don't float on the surface of the liquid. They have to be immersed, and you let this, and now all you have to do is wait a few days. You put this in a room temperature, you keep this in a room temperature, and you check on it at least once a day, because during the fermentation the gases will form, so we'll see some bubbles in the liquid. So you have to push the dish inside, so you have to push the dish into the liquid to push everything to the bottom so that the bubbles will come out of the liquid. And this is all. After a few days you will have a very tasty and very healthy side dish for your meals. If you like sauerkraut, you will also like fermented carrots. I almost forgot, when we're on the topic of the fermented food, I'm very curious to hear if any one of you has seen the animated series, the Japanese anime called Moja Shimon. I don't remember much from it. I think it was a funny one, but my memories are a bit blurry. So it was a slice of life that took place in an agriculture college, and the main character had an ability to see microbes and talk to them. So of course it isn't scientifically accurate how the microbes were depicted, or they don't talk, of course. But the other educational bits were scientifically accurate. So I remember they showcased how microbes are used in food industry. So for example, how you utilize bacteria in preparation of yogurt, how you utilize yeast, how you make tofu, and of course the fermented vegetables that I prepare myself, and a very memorable depiction of how you prepare kiwiak. So yeah, I'm very curious to hear if any one of you has seen this series. The next thing that I'm really happy about is the fact that I was successful at exchanging a water faucet at my mom's. So I'm not a handy person, and I was just forced or encouraged by my mom to do this, because the faucet started to malfunction, and she saw her brother exchange a kitchen one some time ago, and she said that this is very easy and we will be having no trouble with doing the work. So I checked the tutorials, of course YouTube tutorials, and we went to shop, bought a new one, and she was right. It isn't complicated at all. I think it took us probably less than 15 minutes to do all of this. So yeah, if you have any kind of faucet that needs changing, probably you will be successful in doing it all by yourself, and you don't need to hire someone. Also, when I was at my mom's, I took some plant cuttings and brought them here. So the first one is for Crassula ovata, or jade plant. So I've already had a normal jade plant, and she has a variety with leaves that curl inwards. So I think that variety is called the Hobbit one, but I might be wrong. So it looks like the plant took root, it looks healthy and it's growing. And the second one is for the aloe plant, and I don't know, the leaves look a bit wilted, but maybe it needs time, so I'm just keeping my fingers crossed. And the third one, unfortunately, looks like it didn't took root, so maybe the plant didn't survive the voyage, or maybe it wasn't healthy from the beginning. My mother's plant doesn't look healthy too. It looks like it's struggling to grow, so maybe this one just isn't meant to survive. The plant that you could say gave me a Christmas gift was my aloe plant, because when I came back home from Christmas, it was in full bloom and I was so excited to see it. I was excited when I was leaving for Christmas, because I saw that the plant started to grow the flower stalk. But now, when I came home, the first flowers were already open. However, after a few days, there was a catastrophe. The plant fell down and the pot, of course, got shattered into pieces. Fortunately, the aloe plant survived. Of course, the root system got a bit damaged, but the majority of it did survive. Now it seems that it still grows, so it's okay. But unfortunately, the flower stalk got damaged, so I didn't see the whole inflorescence in bloom. I don't know why my aloe looks like this variety of aloe. So other aloe that I know open their leaves, so they look more stable, and this one grows straight up and keeps their leaves positioned almost vertical. And because of that, and the root system that isn't very deep, it's not stable. I even prepared this kind of scaffolding around it to help it keep straight and not fall over. But probably the added weight of the flower stalk and with the flowers was the tipping point and made the flower fall and made the plant fall over. Now I keep it positioned so that it leans on the wall, so it's not so wobbly, and I also put it in a bigger pot to give it more weight at the bottom. But still, I don't know why this aloe grows in such a strange way. Maybe some of you will have an answer to this. Please, if you know, write a comment. I would love to know what's wrong with this aloe. And last but not least, I want to talk about some books that I read and enjoyed, or have some interesting tidbit, or there's some interesting tidbit about them that I want to share with you. So the first ones have, surprisingly, something in common with tarot. So the first one, Philip K. Dick, the original title is Time Out of Joint, and it was written in 1959. So this is, of course, a science fiction book, and this is Philip K. Dick's one of the earlier books. So to be perfectly honest with you, this isn't his best one. There are other who are written in a much better way, or where the plot develops in a more interesting way. However, to my surprise, it seems like this book was an inspiration for a very famous film, and I won't tell you the name of that movie because it will be a very big spoiler for the book for anyone who wants to read it. And also another interesting bit about this book is that in December, of course, I was working with the Housewives tarot deck, and this book also takes place in a similar setting as that deck, because it takes place in 1950s in the USA in some suburban or small town. And here the main character is male, not female, but he also leads life that is not usual for other men of that time. So his name is Ragul Gam, and his main income comes not from a stable job, but he sews crosswords from the newspaper and gets money for winning the first place. So, for instance, in the beginning of the book, we see how he isn't really feeling that his life is an accomplished one. He doesn't have a real job. He doesn't have a wife or children. He lives with his sister and her family. And what this book is about is that he starts to notice that in his usual existence, there are some discrepancies that make him question the reality of the world that he lives in. So I won't tell you much more. If you want to read it, of course, it's readily available in English. And there are the usual themes that you also see in other Dick's books. So the questioning of the reality, questioning of your impressions of the world, how do you distinguish what is real and what is not. So a nice read, but not the best one, but quite an interesting one still. The other book that you could say is connected to the Housewife's Tarot deck was a book that I chose in a more conscious way. So this is a little non-fiction book that I found completely at random in a second-hand shop a few years back. And the title is Grandma, Some of Her Ways, as told to Margaret Bard. So this book, in a similar way, focuses on women, but this time it's women of the Victorian era. So Margaret Bard collected stories from her friends about their grandmothers. And so as she writes here in the blurb, this book is not about the elite, so the wealthy, the aristocracy, or the destitute woman, so the poor one, but it's about the intimate days of the working men's wives of that period. So the book was written in 1998, and as you can see, Maigret was born in 1930. So we get a collection of stories probably from people around 60, 70 who talk about their grandmothers who were born in the second half of 19th century. And each of those stories is a rather short one. We get 1 or 2 pages. There are also some photos. There are some letters, some memorabilia from those grandmothers. The women here were employed as either a housemaid or a housekeeper. Some of them took some washing or ironing to get an additional money for the household. Some took tenants. We have a seamstress here, a dancer. Many were teachers or nurses or midwives. Some were managing a pub with their husband. I think the most interesting job here is of Elizabeth Powell, who worked at a local fashion house, and she accompanied the buyer to London each month to select clothes for women who were going on cruises. They would buy a complete wardrobe for each client. cruising was a popular pastime for the leisured rich in the 20s. And as for the husbands, many of them were either employed by army or were in navy or by railways. We also get some jobs like seaman merchant, a butler, a carpenter, a musician at the army band, a dance teacher. We even have a royal groom at the Buckingham Palace. So, as you can say, these really were the people from the, probably similar to the middle class today, as Margaret Bard calls those families the ordinary families. So not the really poor ones who work at factories, very long hours and very excruciatingly difficult jobs. As you can imagine, most of those women had large families, starting from 2, 3 to even 10 or 15 children. We get only little glimpse about lives of those women, and it's like anecdotes, you know, those family stories that we like to tell again and again during family gatherings. I think it's very interesting what does stay in our memory about people. So, for example, in this story here about Martha Fried, the teller here talks about how the kitchen range was lit late on in the morning and banged down in the afternoon when the rice puddings were cooked. It was heated by coal, and one day a week, when Grand and Auntie Ruth would go to the cemetery to tidy the family graves, the range would be heated with fir cones, which they collected from the cemetery grounds. Nothing was ever wasted. My Gran loved a bit of gossip, but would never admit to eavesdropping, so it was always, when I was shaking out a duster, I heard. So, you know, this is a very small detail, but after all those years, it's still alive in the memory of the grandchild here. For example, in this story, we get an image of a Gran who smoked a clay pipe. In fact, she was never without it. As she gently rocked, she would knit furiously. She was never without these huge knitting needles, which looked like drumsticks and were used by us as such when we got the chance, and thick, dark wool. So very little details, and what I liked about those stories, because to be honest with you, this book isn't in any way revolutionary. It isn't any highbrow analysis of the Victorian era woman, and it doesn't really give us much information about those people there. And this is completely understandable, because the people here tell stories of their grandmothers who hadn't been alive for many years. Some people tell stories about grandmothers that died even before they were born. Other grandmothers died when they were children. Only a small portion of those women here were alive after the Second World War. But what I liked was how in these small glimpses of their lives, I could see a person who is alive and is not like a monument. Because I don't know about you, but often I think many of us fall prey to thinking of people of the past that they are distant, that they are not relatable, that they, for instance, didn't have fun, or that they were very composed, and their life was lived with purpose, and everything was organized. They made conscious decisions. you know, like historical figures that we learn from the books about. So they feel very distant. In a similar way, I think we imagine adults when we are children. So we often think of adults as people who are complete, who are mature, who know much and who know everything, who know what they are doing. But when we grow older, now we see, no, everyone is making things up as they go. We don't know nothing, and we just trying to craft our life together when we are really running in the dark, and we never learn. And we always make mistakes, and we always feel unsure if we always feel unsure if we are making good decisions in our life. So this book, I think, is a quite nice image that brings color to those Victorian women, that shows them as people, as real people, with all the good and bad sides, and makes them less distant. So, of course, probably this isn't a book that's easy to get. I'm not really recommending this book because I'm guessing it isn't easy to get, and probably it was published in a small number. It looks like it was published by some small printing company. I didn't even find an entry for it at Goodreads. So, but if you see a similar book, I recommend to read it, because it's always good to learn about others' lives and gain additional views, additional points of view of people in who live life in completely different circumstances than we are living. This novel was written by a well-known Hungarian author, Sándor Márai, and it's called Embers in English. It was written in 1942, and it takes place just before the Second World War. And the main character here, from whom the narration is written from the point of view of him, is an old general. Now he's aged 75, and he's about to meet for a dinner his old friend Konrad. And he hasn't seen Konrad for 41 years. So we as readers don't know what happened between them, because when they were young, when they were children, they met in a military school. So when they were young, they were really close to each other. They were almost like twin brothers. After the school, when they were still in the military, when they were going up in the ranks, they lived together, and they spent all their time together. So there was this very close male friendship between them. And I was really disappointed that the publisher spoiled what was the reason for this break of friendship. And I really hate when publishers do those things to, entice us to read the book. So there's this kind of suspense, because for 40 years, General and Konrad didn't even contact each other. What was interesting wasn't really the reason, but there was this more deeper exploration of first of all their friendship, how they were different, how their characters differed. So the general was a very outgoing person. He was a very wealthy aristocrat from Hungary. and he, for instance, loved the horses, and when they were young, he liked to party, and he had a large group of friends, and he had a very high social status, of course. And in contrast, Konrad came from Poland. He had a name and he had money, but he was much poorer, and all of the money his family spent to let him go to this military school, because this school in Vienna was a very well-known and high status school. He was quite ashamed how little money he had, and he was also but he was also you could say proud man, because he didn't want the help of the general. The other difference between them was that Konrad was an introspective person. He liked to read. He loved music. So he had this very emotional side to him that he, for instance, expressed in music, and in general saw these differences in Konrad, but he thought he knew him well. But then the event happened, as I said, that completely shattered his opinion of Konrad. And during the dinner, now they can discuss that event. And the second thing that is I think that is the biggest theme of this book, is the question of whether do we really want to know the truth about the other person, or is it even possible to learn the truth? So here, General is a quite, you could say, rigid man. He believes what he believes, and he's quite sure of his truth of that past events, and does he really want to listen to Konrad's side of things. I really enjoyed how the characters were portrayed here. So they are portrayed as complex people. We learn more about the general because he's the main because the book is written from his point of view. So they were both men of honor. So they were raised and they were born and raised to serve the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So they were men who follow orders, who are who are raised to be composed, and who follow a very strict social etiquette, a man of regime. But to both of those men, there's also another side. So, for example, as I said, Konrad was a contemplative person, and he expressed his inner self in, for instance, in music, and he wanted to learn about the world and about the people through reading books. And General came from Hungary, so he had this. He had also this romantic part of himself that came from his father's side. So he also had this passionate and wild and untamed part of himself. So both of them were interesting characters to meet. And the book is written very well. The language of it is exquisite, and I fully recommend this author. I'm not sure if I read other books by him, but he does explore the old world, the world of Austro-Hungarian Empire, and how it was different, and how it, for instance, the people from that era were stuck in their ways and didn't want to change. And we also get this in here in general. So even though it's 20th century, he still is a man of 19th century, and he doesn't want to accept how the world is changing. So a very interesting book, and I recommend it to you. And it's also not a long one, so you know, you can read it quite fast. And the last book that I want to show you is a French book. So it was written by a Belgian author, Georges Simenon, and the title of it is Maigret Sets a Trap. So this is one of the large collection or large series of books written by Simenon about Commissaire Maigret, so the French police inspector at the Parisian police. And my friend introduced me to this series, and I love all of it, all of those books. So I would love to read, maybe not the full collection, because it's more than 80. I think it's something around 80 books, and there are also short stories. So Simenon started to write about Maigret in 1930s, and during the Second World War he had a break, but he came back to writing about Maigret after the war. This one is from 1955. What I love about these books is that they are short reads, so you can definitely read them in one sitting, and they are very delightful to read. So these are not, you know, the depressive or so they don't concentrate on the brutality of violence, of murders. So I wouldn't call them cozy mystery, but they are close to it. But what I love most about it is how me and my friend call these books that they are almost murder mysteries in disguise, because the murder is like an excuse for the plot. So of course we get all the procedural, of course Maigret as a policeman is trying to find the suspect, is trying to find the perpetrator. So we get all the but this isn't a standard procedural detective book. Maigret is extremely skillful at crafting these detailed environments. So for me, those books are more about the people, the French people, Parisian people, or people that lived in the neighboring towns, or some small towns where Maigret and his wife spend their summer holidays. And so it concentrates on a very small part of, for instance, Paris. So we could get a plot that centers on one street, and it's a very detailed image of that small society, of that small group of people that live there. at that times there was still a big class divide, so this we get also this we get so Maigret, so Simenon so Simenon is, so what's interesting, so Simenon is also very good at characterizing these social groups. So we get books that so we get books where the murder takes place in wealthy circles, so in the aristocracy, or maybe the intelligentsia. So some books take place in the old money families, the wealthy, the aristocracy almost, or maybe some well-educated circles. So people like university professors, or doctors, or lawyers with very good reputation. We also get the new money people, and we also get the ordinary people here, of course. I remember one book that take place in Parisian docks. So it showcased the working men from that place, from that district. So you can get a book that, for instance, is a portrait of a French baker in a small town. You get the gist. So it's an amazing portrait of the environment of these small worlds in Paris, in France. It's a very detailed psychological image. Maigret and Simenon also show a great compassion and sympathy towards the suspects and the murderer. So Simenon paints us the family dynamics, because many of those murders take place in families, or were somehow triggered by unhealthy relations in the family of the murderer, or maybe there was some kind of working situation that influenced the crime. So there's this psychological exploration, and you could say moral debate on on the motives of those characters. So what it is that pushes us to act in a certain way. Yeah, I really love this series, and I fully recommend checking it out. It doesn't require any kind of effort to read it. It's a very short one, and it does pull you into the action. And Maigret himself is a character that has a lot of charm to him, and that's also another selling point of those books. So that's the last book that I want to recommend to you now. And I know I've talked a lot in this video, and I extremely appreciate those of you who stick to the end. So big kudos to you. But I'm grateful to all of you who just decided to click on the video and spend a little bit of time with me. Thank you very much. Would love to get some comments from you. For example, maybe you have some opinion on the decks that I've been using. I also would love to hear some recommendations for an easy, simple to understand book about Thoth that doesn't rely on astrology and Kabbalah. And any other comment is welcome. Maybe you have some other recommendations of book that you think you think were good. So yeah, I love getting comments from you. I love you all and wish you a good day.